All right. So basically, the reason why this video or how this video came about is the other day I was talking to, well, I am starting therapy again. So I did therapy in 2024 for like a few months, and then I didn't have money anymore, but now I have money again. Well, I have insurance again. So I was starting therapy again the other day. So I was starting with a new therapist. And you know, like with new therapists, they ask you like all of the questions like, you know, what's your background? Like, what's your family like? Why are you coming to therapy? All these things. And when I was asking the questions, I was like, why are you being so nosy? Like, why are you in my business? You don't need to know that much. Just tell me how to fix what's wrong with me and then we can move on. But obviously that's an issue. So the reason I am restarting therapy, well, first of all, I think everybody needs therapy. I think no matter how good or bad you perceive your childhood to be, I think therapy is just a good practice to have just for communication practice. But anyways, also I just feel like there is a block, something that's just stopping me like from getting to my next level, from becoming the next iteration of who I'm supposed to be. I feel like in this current mindset with the current tools that I've reached the potential, if that makes sense. So like I've done all I can do with the mindset that I have on right now. So I need to elevate and break through barriers that I've created from my past in order to level up, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was talking to her and like answering her questions, and again I felt like really invaded, like, why are you in my business? So, and I'm still gonna go to therapy obviously, but I also was like, I should practice opening up and being vulnerable. And I thought, what better place to do that than the internet? Hello. So I think I'm gonna tell my story. I think I'm gonna just blab about my life and share about my life, and hopefully it helps someone. Hopefully it helps me to be more open in therapy. I would think that if I have revealed everything about myself, well, not everything, but like revealed most things about myself on the internet, then it would be more helpful to be able to do it in therapy. Yeah, so I'm just gonna talk about myself. Yeah, so that's really what this series is going to be, just me talking about different time periods in my life so that I can be more vulnerable, because one of the things I'm working on, or I would like to work on in therapy, is being more vulnerable, because vulnerability is really hard. Like, I hate people being in my business. Like, I actually hate it. So I'm doing this because I need to get out of that. So here we go. All right, so where do I begin? I guess I should start at the beginning. Yeah, so I was born into a Christian household, very Christian, very in close proximity to the church and to leaders in the church. So that's kind of like the viewpoint and the lens that I kind of see my life. So being that I grew up in the church, we moved around a lot. I would say we started off in South Florida, then we went to Georgia. Started off in South Florida, then we went to Georgia. Then we moved back to Florida, but like Central Florida. Then we moved to South Carolina. Then we moved back to Central Florida. And from that area is when I graduated high school. So I moved 4 times, but I lived in 3 states by the time I graduated. And within those moves, like, we had also moved like different houses and different schools within those states as well. So I think by the time I graduated, I moved to, I want to say 7 different schools, if I'm not mistaken. And because I was at 7 different schools, it became really easy and difficult for me to make friends. And so what I mean by that is, like, I became very good at making friends and making people feel really comfortable around me, because obviously I didn't want to be like a loser or like a lame. And I kept coming to the school as a newbie with all these people who had already made their friends, And so I was very good at like making people feel welcome and making people feel like connected to me, all the while I didn't feel connected to them. So it ended up being that there were a lot of people who were like, I'm their best friend, but I like they didn't really even know that much about me, and no fault of theirs, it was literally me. But that's kind of how I lived my life, honestly, of just like only going to the surface level of relationships, but like being the person who like listened and observed and like knew a lot of things about other people, but like never really gave up too much about myself, because for me that was just like a protective measure, I think, just because I'm like, okay, I'm probably gonna move soon, so there's no point in like you knowing anything about me, honestly, because I'm probably gonna move soon. And I think that's kind of just where it came from, of just like, okay, this is how I'm gonna protect myself and keep myself like sane. But then as an adult, obviously now I'm trying to undo that, and it's actually really hard because, you know, this is how I've lived my life for a really long time, or that was how I lived my life for a long time, of just like being the person who like listens and being really good at turning a conversation. Like, oh my gosh, so good at turning a conversation. Like if someone asked me something about myself and I didn't want to answer, like, I don't know, I was just really good at like turning it, or like asking them another question to get them talking about themselves, just because I didn't feel comfortable talking about myself. Crazy, but like that was the way that I like lived my life. So that was like how I navigated school and how I navigated friendships. So all throughout high school, for me personally, I never, or not even just high school, all throughout school after elementary, I never considered myself to have found a best friend, or to have found like someone who I really felt could relate to me and like the stuff that I'd been through. Because growing up in the church is a very unique experience, like very unique. And I feel like if you haven't grown up in the church, then you don't really understand like the lore. Like you really don't understand the lore unless you've grown up in church, because all like PKs or like people who've grown up in the church, like they understand the lore. There is lore, and it's very deep. And I feel like for me it was a very different experience than most of my peers, because like most of the people would be like, wait, are like you guys have moved so much, why are you moving so much, are you military? And I'm like, no. But then they used to tell us to say like, no, we're not military, but tell them we're in the army of the Lord. And I'm like, I am 12, I'm not telling anybody that I'm in the army, like whatever. But yeah, so it was a very unique experience, and not a lot of people could relate to it. So then that also made me more apprehensive to share, because I'm like, the time it would take for you to understand who I am and my history, I'll be gone by then. So I'm not even gonna invest, you know. And hindsight 2020, probably not the best plan of action, but it was what was gonna keep me sane. So yeah, growing up in the church, my mom was an armor bearer to the pastor. So basically an armor bearer is like an assistant. So she was armor bearer to the pastor. So because of that, we were very, very like intermixed into the church. And my mom has 5 kids. So all of us were like, we were very intermixed, very the team. So because of that, there were a lot of things that we just had to kind of prioritize when it came to the church, to make sure that the church was still able to be up and afloat and running. So for example, like we were the praise and worship team, but we're also the dance team, and we're also the young usher team, like all of the things, like we're the cleanup crew, we're the setup crew. We were like a lot of the things at a very early age. So we learned to be pretty dependable and responsible in that way, just because like if it was on our mom, then like we also had to contribute, or we also contributed, so that, you know, she didn't have to do everything herself. And our church wasn't like a really big church, so it was probably maybe like 20, 30 people, and we didn't have our own building for like quite some time. So because of that, like, we would have to set up and then break down. Or when we did have our building, you know, just like coming in on Saturdays, making sure it's clean, ready, prep for the next day. We had Bible study on Wednesdays, prayer on Tuesdays, church on Sunday, and then if we went to someone else's church, like we had our own service, but then we went to someone else's church to visit, then that was another aspect too. So we were very involved. And I feel like that was a different experience in itself, just because, like I said, we had to prioritize things of the church, so other things took a back seat. Like sports was not a thing. Like, we were not playing sports. My brothers got to play, my youngest two brothers got to play, but that was after, you know, some time things had shifted. But I didn't play any sports because, like, we had to do stuff at the church. And also, like, a lot of our finances went to the church. And because of that, like, mind you, my mom was a single mom. She had 5 kids. And so she was, like, doing the best she could, but she would go, like, above and beyond. And so a lot of the finances that she made was given to the church, like, help keep the church afloat. And consequently, we were, like, I don't want to say it went without, but, like, we didn't have, like, all the things because the money went to keep the church afloat. So that meant for us that most of the time we didn't have our own place. So most of the time we lived with our pastor and her family. And so that made for, like, very, very crowded homes. I'm talking, like, the PTSD. I'm talking, like 10 to 13 people in a household, in like a 3-bedroom house, with, like, 2 bathrooms. Do the calculations. God is a deliverer. Anyways, so yeah, like 10 to 13 people in a 3-bedroom household or less, all just, like, you know, trying to make do, because obviously there were 5 of us, like 5 of us children, and then my mom, and then, like, their family as well. So it was a lot of us under one household. And I remember, like, I used to be so embarrassed, like, because my friends would be like, oh, why do you never have us over or whatever? And I'm like, no, like, no. And so I remember one time it was my 13th birthday, and I don't think I was 13. I think I was like 11. I was 11. She came over to my house for the birthday party, and, like, you know, after everybody was there at the birthday party, so I'm like, yeah, you know, like, my family just came to here for my birthday party. But then, like, as the day was going on, you know, people were, like, winding down. She's like, what are all these cars doing here? Like, I thought you said you only live with your family. I was like, yeah, because at school, you know, I lied. I'm not gonna hold you. I lied. It's like, yeah, I only live with, you know, my immediate family. But what 11-year-old wants to tell her friend, like, yeah, I have 13 people living in my house, and me and my entire family stays in one room. Like, come on. Anyways, so yeah, she was over, and she was like, why are these people here? And I was like, yeah, they live here. All of them. Trauma. Anyways, so it was just, like, different, because, like, we were pretty dependent on them for, like, majority, basically all of my adolescence until I graduated, and then I moved out and went to college. But yeah, we were basically lived with them the whole time, and which also was, like, a different thing, because it was not just us who was there. It was, like, their family, and then, like, yeah, it was just, like, a lot. So that was kind of, like, the background of upbringing, and just, like, how it was in adolescence and everything like that.